Good morning, everybody. I hope everybody is well. Welcome to the WOTC Now Women Summit. I am back again. I am Mika Abraham. I'm a creative consultant. And today's panel is going to be an exciting one because this is an industry that I'm involved in. And this panel is called the Now PR, Media and Marketing. Now, everybody knows that PR, media, and marketing all goes into one, but it's something that's so essential in your business and everything you do in your brand. So I'm going to be introducing my panel today. Some amazing women who have done some amazing things, worked with some amazing company, even created their own firms, are going to be speaking to us today. So I'm so excited. Just to let you guys know that please, when our panels are speaking, please do ask questions, and we're going to make sure those questions get answered. So again, I am Mika Abraham, and I'm your host for today, and I'm so excited about this panel. So I'm going to introduce my panel. We have Jenni Thompson, who does brand marketing, PR, and is a business strategy consultant. We have, if you can give us a wave.
Hi.
Jenni. Hi. Then we have Jordan Mitchell, who is the co-founder of Good Culture. We have Jennifer Hodgson, who is the founder of MODA PR. Then we have Jenni Holman, who is the director of PR and communications at Mason Rose. We have Bukky George Taylor, who's the CEO and founder of Robert Taylor Media. So thank you guys for joining us at the WOTC Summit. How are you guys?
Good. Pleased to be here.
You all look so beautiful. I'm so excited to be on this panel with you guys today. We were having a conversation off screen, and one of the topics that we're speaking about is people see PR and don't actually understand what PR is and who a PR person is, essentially. So I'm going to throw this at the PRs because we've got a wide range of people on our panel today. But for those who may not know what it is to work in PR, could you give us a brief description of what the PR industry is about and what the role entails? So I can throw this to Bukky.
Me first. Hello, everyone. It's an honor to be here. Thank you, Mika, for the fantastic introduction. I like to call PR the business of persuasion. Whether you're persuading people within your own organization or people outside of your organization, that's pretty much what it is. And of course, we're using very interesting tools, such as, of course, television, radio, print, digital. And, you know, with our new times, of course, we're having to even persuade people using TikTok and everything else that's coming into play in 2020 and 2021. The Public Relations Society of America defines public relations as a process that builds mutually beneficial relationships between a brand and its public. So it is the art of managing how a brand is perceived or how an individual is perceived using different tactics and strategy.
If you'd like to add to that?
Yeah, I'd agree with that. It's a great summary, Bukky. There's an old saying, I'm sure some of my colleagues on this panel have heard, that advertising is what you pay for, publicity is what you pray for. And you know, on the PR side, that's very much sort of where we sort of come in. I think possibly common misconceptions are good old Patsy and Eddie on Absolutely Fabulous. I don't know if some of my colleagues are going to nod their heads with this, especially in my line. I specialise in sort of luxury. But I think we can all agree it's PR, not ER. But it isn't a 9 to 5. It's fast-paced. And with all the different changes in how we all consume media, whether it's on our phones, watching TikTok, or reading a magazine, or picking up a newspaper, you know, it's changed. It's changed quite a lot. I don't know if Jenni and Jordan have something to add to that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, I would just say that, you know, the landscape has changed sort of unrecognisably from when I first got into the PR space. And I think now it's less about kind of pushing a brand narrative, and so it's kind of just the brand having a kind of one-way dialogue to the consumer, and it's a lot about actually brands responding to what's happening in the landscape and sort of changing the messaging in accordance to sort of how everyone's feeling and what's actually happening. And I mean, if I was a PR this week having a sell-in with everything that's happening with the Meghan and Harry news, you have to change your tack. Your strategy has got to change. And I think that's the biggest thing about what we do. We're nimble and we're responsive to the real life landscape, not just the media landscape.
Yeah. Definitely. One question I do want to ask you guys is, how did you all get into your field? So we'll start, whoever wants to let's kick it off with Jordan. So how did you become the PR? In fact, what inspired you all to go into the industries that you are in today? And I would love to hear from all of you.
Well, I've always been into fashion. I think that was my first sort of route into this industry. So I thought I wanted to be a journalist, and I was like, oh my God, I want to work for Vogue. And then I interned at a bunch of magazines, and I was like, okay, so I have to work in a fashion cupboard for like 5 years and then get paid 10p. I definitely don't want to do that. And then sort of slowly kind of just did lots of different internships in lots of different places, and then finally landed on sort of PR as a sort of route into the world of entertainment and the world of fashion without actually having to be a fashion designer or a fashion journalist. So yeah, that was kind of my route. It was about the core interest being fashion and entertainment, and then looking at the sort of surrounding ways in which I can access that through communications.
Love that. Jenni, how did you get into your industry? And that's Jenni Thompson.
There we go. Jenni Thompson.
Ooh. I think you're on mute.
Sorry, classic. My route was pretty different. I finished university in the early 90s, and I went into a marketing job having done a business degree with languages and selling China cups at the time. And I remember just thinking, oh my God, I've spent all this time doing my degree and here I am in a really straight marketing job, and it just wasn't for me at all. So I answered a job advert in a local newspaper at the time, and the advert was really well crafted. And remember, at the time, this was when digital, social media, digital just wasn't a thing. You actually looked in a paper to kind of find an ad, or you sort out a graduate training scheme or whatever. The advert was really well crafted, and I remember thinking it described Caroline Shoes, the person whose job was moving on in the organisation. And I remember thinking they seem really progressive, and maybe if I got in there, I could learn about the advertising industry. This was in regional media. The advertising director at the time didn't believe in graduates. He was very open with that when I walked in. He just said, graduates, they're a bit airy-fairy. They don't know what they want to do. They never put in a hard day's work. He was really kind of biased, if you like. And I kind of proved him wrong a bit. He didn't give me that job. Obviously, I was very naive coming out of university. But he said, if you start at the bottom and you work your way up, we'll see what you can do. And I started taking adverts on the phone. And I was an ad director by the time I was 29, I had his job running the ad department, the graphics department, the production department, and working with editors and journalists. So from there, I stuck in regional media for 26 years,
Wow.
with two of the large media players. The second media player that I worked for, I worked as the same job, an ad director. But then about 12 years ago, once I had my son, I realized that those kind of all-consuming jobs, high leadership, looking after lots of people, looking after the strategic development of the managers, etc., was going to be quite hard to do with a small child. So my then boss said to me, why don't you pick up some magazines and see what you can do with them? And he gave me some fledgling luxury magazines, and I became the only person in my organisation across the UK actually to have a job called a publisher. So I moved out of commercial into looking after editorial and commercial, and basically bringing the whole brand together and putting out magazines in a regional space. Fast forward, I positioned that job with my then CEO 3.5 years ago and said, look, we do this really well regionally, and we're making good money, and we're connecting with fantastic audiences, and our advertisers are getting great responses. Why don't you scale it up nationally? And he said, will you head it up for me? After a couple of conversations. And I said, yeah. So that's what we did. And I looked then launched those magazines to 30 plus magazines across the UK, working through the local teams, but with exactly the same blueprint. And yeah, that's kind of my story, if you like, in media. And now I work for myself as a PR, branding and marketing person. So I'm kind of offering my clients the best of all of my knowledge.
Yeah.
Their mission to promote their brands.
That's amazing. First of all, on the longevity in the industry, because I know it's not easy to have that many years in the industry as well. And it's very, very tough. So congratulations on that. But before we go into it, I have to introduce our panelists again, Jennifer Hodgson. Thank you for joining us. Hi, Jen.
Hi, sorry. Sorry, I'm
okay. So how are you?
I'm good. Thank you for having me.
No problem. So if you can, give us an introduction into how you started into PR. In fact, what made you even form your own agency?
Well, to be honest, I started off as a little PR intern when I was like 24, I think it was. I went into it, what I consider, I think, quite late. And it was just because I did a load of things beforehand, give uni a go, went traveling, bits and bobs like that. And then I remember just that everyone, I feel like people really like to do, but if anyone used to watch The Hill, I remember just watching her and being like, whatever she does, that is what I want to do. So I started doing like research, and then I ended up working with, I got an internship at the Can Group in Manchester. So obviously the Can Group is probably most famous for managing like Katie Price and Peter. So I was there like just after Katie left, I think. So that was like kind of like a baptism of fire kind of thing. So I got the weekend, and after 3 days, I got a job there like permanently, part-time. And then I just fell in love with the industry. It was like the talent management side, PR, and I was really like fascinated about how it all worked and how you go from, I don't know, seeing something start like a product there and ended up in a magazine and on TV. Like I was just so fascinated by it. And then watching Kelly Patone and seeing how badass she was, basically, I kind of just thought, that's what I want to do. So I was doing it. I did Can Group for about a year, and then went back to education. So I went back to finish my marketing communications degree at Chester Uni. And it was there really that I kind of just realised PR was definitely like my strength, was what I'm good at. So I just threw everything into it. During my final year, created like a business model for a PR agency. Did really well in the degree, and fast forward about 6 months after that, I was working in-house at a brand as a PR manager. But most people who will know on this panel that have gone self-employed, you kind of reach maybe like that point when you're in-house, or I don't know, you're not feeling it anymore. And it got to the point where I was like 30, 31, and brands that I'd worked with like Doll Beauty, and everyone was just like, why don't you go on your own? Like, what are you doing? And I waited till the global pandemic to quit my job and start my agency. So it was generally, it's nearly a year now, and it's been, I don't think I've slept longer than 4 hours a night, but it's been worth it. And now I'm just growing at the moment. I class like a little boutique agency, but we've got some really big clients, publicist to HLD management that you all might know, a varied type of clientele, everything from beauty to recently taking on the Dream Boys. So it's a wide spectrum of people that we deal with. But I've got to say, it's literally like the best thing I ever did, deciding to take the leap. And I think it was really, really hard at first, because obviously, your global pandemic, you just think, oh my God, I'm going to stay safe. And I did the complete opposite of that. I was on holiday in Vegas, rang my boyfriend, was like, I'm not going back. I hate it. And
love it.
He was just like, go for it, and we'll see what happens. And started off with just one client, and then within 3 weeks I had 3, and then it just built, and we just moved into our first office. So it's
congratulations.
That's amazing. Honestly, that is amazing. The fact that you even took that step out. I know it's not easy. And I think, again, it goes back to what we were saying off screen. A lot of the times people think that it's very easy to go and start off your own thing. Even, you have to go and gain new clients, going out and networking, all these different things. It's not easy at all. But for the simple fact that you took that step, a lot of you women actually took that step and decided, we've worked with a firm long enough, but I wanted to create something for us by myself so that I can also extend my skills and gifts to other people as well. So well done on that. Congratulations. So I'm going to give it to Ellie Turner. If you can tell us how you got into your industry.
Yeah, of course. So actually, similarly to Jenni Thompson, I also did a business degree with languages as well. Yeah, and then kind of finished that. I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do. I kind of wanted to go into law, and I'd wanted to for a long time. So I was about to do a conversion course, and I was looking at all these different programs. And then one of my friends was like, oh, you should just start temping for a while. So I started temping in a film charity that was connected to the BFI. So we just started doing, I was there kind of as a runner, working on like different press junkets and premieres and things. And the more I kind of started seeing what the events team did and what the PR team did and the marketing team did, I just started shadowing each one. So I kind of kept just coming back, and whenever there was like a vacancy or the intern or something was off, I would just come back and keep filling various roles in the kind of marketing and events teams. And then absolutely just loved it. And then wanted to really stick with events and marketing, but kind of went into a few different roles. So from there, I was in kind of conference production, events programming. I also worked for a while doing business development and actually freelance as a wedding planner as well, which was really, really cool. And then the more I did more of the events and the wedding planning, I then started working for an events agency. And then literally from there, it was just, I fell in love with it, loads of different events agencies, being able to go to like such a varied range of events, from like weddings and social events, but to obviously product launches, where obviously I would work with, PR agencies and things like that as well. So for brand activations, and yeah, it was just really exciting. And then I got the job at Bvlgari about 3.5 years ago. And I've been there since and love it. So yeah, but definitely not what I thought I'd be doing, to be honest. So
you touched on the fact that you did wedding planning, like you were helping with weddings. Now I know weddings are not easy. So how were you able to do weddings and go into what you're doing now? Yeah,
weddings are they are. There's a lot to them. Obviously, you very much are working with that couple very much from the whole time, so right from the beginning, possibly for kind of a couple of years, depending on how long it takes. So you're not just doing planning for the actual wedding day. You're probably doing a lot of things around it as well. So even invitations and things. So yeah, it's very different. And to be honest, I love that side of it, and I really loved working with the couples. But again, I think I got invited by someone who worked at Bvlgari to the hotel, and I thought, wow, this is a really nice place. And because I'd worked quite a lot with brands as well, I think I want to go back into that. And that's kind of, I started working again with brands, working on more of the kind of corporate event side. And that's how then I kind of transitioned over.
Yeah, amazing. Yeah. Bukky, how did you get into your industry as well?
Thank you. I think my story is a bit, peculiar in the sense that my mom was actually the PR person. She studied, PR and marketing. She has a master's from Boston University, and she became the general manager of PR marketing for Nigeria Airways, which was our only local air carrier. So I grew up with a lot of media in my home. I grew up with a lot of events being planned, and I was allowed to go to some of those things. And went to college. I didn't think I was going to, I didn't study PR. I studied African and African-American history. When I was 25, I decided I wanted to start my own company. So I started my agency at 25. I was living in Winnipeg, Manitoba in Canada. And a year later, I'm receiving phone calls from Nigeria saying, listen, we were interested in what you're doing. We need you to come down. And they're flying me in for different projects. And I ended up moving back to Nigeria, which is my home country. And my agency will be 15 years old next year.
Wow.
I'm super excited.
This is amazing. Yeah. All of you women are absolutely amazing. Wow. So you decided to also branch off and go and start your own agency as well?
I did. I mean, I worked corporate America, I worked corporate Canada, and I just decided that, you know, everything I was doing seemed to lead towards this. And of course, did a lot of professional development and all of that. And, you know, I've been here in Nigeria since, and we're doing, you know, fantastic work. We're working with Dubai. We're the official PR agency for Dubai Tourism. We're the official PR agency for Pernod Ricard. So I represent Martell, Chivas, Jameson. I've done a Rise Fashion Week. I've dabbled everywhere. And when I got into this market, I mean, there were PR agencies, but there were much bigger agencies. There were more advertising agencies that had PR departments. I was probably one of the first ones that came as a solo, you know, publicist into the scene, and it's worked really well. I have a staff strength of 16 now, and, you know, we're doing it.
I love it. I absolutely love it. This is going to be a very interesting conversation. I'm excited. And last but not least, Jenni Holman. How did you get into your industry?
Yeah, gosh, I think, if I really think back, I think when I was about 16, I did some work experience at Mattel, founder of Barbies. So I guess Barbie was kind of my first boss, female boss. And I was actually popped into the PR department. I sort of shadowed various departments. And when I went into the PR department, I think it kind of sparked something. And then, like we all have, a couple of years later, I was thinking, what am I going to do with my life? And of course, my first reaction was to go into acting. And then I realized, of course, I just didn't want an eighth of the amount that, you know, proper actors do. And I thought, what am I going to do? So I did the whole just working abroad, and I worked in ski resorts, bars, pot wash, everything. And eventually came back and thought, okay, I'm going to try doing some form of comms degree or something like that at uni, which I did. And then after uni, with the kind of thought of, oh, okay, PR, I think that's where I'm going to be. I knew I wanted to be in London. I just had like London in my head as being like the center of everything. And then also learning that there was something called travel PR. I was like, I'm going to try that. And then I got my first job at a company called BGB Communications, which is now part of the Goliath that is for communications. I don't know if anybody knows that, but now it's for travel. And I cut my teeth there with a brilliant lady called Debbie Hindle. Yeah, it's where I sort of really passionate about it. I've always stayed in travel. I went in-house for a bit. Mentioned skiing earlier, so I worked for a ski company for a bit. My role was made redundant, which at 26, I think, and I just bought my first house. I had a mortgage.
Oh, wow.
It seemed like a real disaster, but actually, I don't know how many people, if anybody on this panel, have been made redundant, but it was lessons learned and so forth. And I went into, and I just think it's important to share, especially with so many people going through maybe similar situations at the moment with the job industry being what it is, especially if you work in PR, especially if you were maybe work in travel. And then it gave me my first kind of chance when I went back to agency side. I started working for a company that specialized in sort of luxury, hotels, travel, hospitality. I was there for a couple of years before joining Mason Rose, which is sales and PR and digital agency, specializing in all things kind of, again, hospitality. And I've been there 7 years. So I'm grateful every single day to have kind of found this incredible industry that I genuinely love. So I feel very lucky. And I can see some smiles on this too. So I think other people on this panel might agree.
Love that. So the one thing that I've realized is, especially in PR, so I work from the music side of thing, and I think it's very, very different compared to if you work in fashion or branding. Is so different. I think with me, what's helped me in my industry or my line of work in terms of music side is networking. So for all of you guys, how has networking helped you in building your brand or even building other people's brands? Because I know it's something that's very, very essential, but certain connections have gotten you to the next step. So how were you able to build those networks, and how far did they take you?
I'd say for me, working, because the agency Good Culture is sort of 50% talent, 50% brand. And I think across both, network's important. But when it comes to talent and when you're launching new faces into markets, so for instance, we work with Steph London, Clara Ampho, a range of kind of different talent from different sort of verticals. And actually, to get those people covers, to get those people those brand deals, you actually need those relationships for them to pick your talent beyond someone else. So, you know, network is incredibly important. And we live in a world now where actually we have so many tools available to us. Like, I actually take my hat off when I'm listening to you, Jenny, and you talking about kind of having to go through the newspapers to find opportunities. And I so know that, you know, that back then it was so much harder to connect with people, and now we've got LinkedIn, now we've got sort of social media where you can actually forge those connections so much easier. It expedites the process. But yeah, I think relationships in this business is everything. You're only as good as the person you've got on speed dial.
Yeah, definitely. I kind of agree. I can definitely agree. Ellie, what do you think about that? How's your network helped you?
Yeah, definitely. I think for me, in fact, actually, even a lot of the roles I've even got as well have actually always tended to be often because I've been out there speaking to people. And I think sometimes when it comes to networking, people can get a little bit nervous and think, you know, but how do I approach it? And I think it's always, rather than always thinking, you know, what I want to kind of get out of this, it's like looking and being like, but how can I really just build this relationship, get on with this person? What can I maybe offer them? Because a lot of the time I haven't even really realized I was doing it. And I remember someone saying to me like, oh, you're always networking, you know, you're always at these events. And I was like, I'm just at the events. I like chatting to people, and it's not normally because I'm looking, you know, for anything. It's just the idea of, I think it's always good to be building relationships and maintaining them. And an event, to be honest, especially as well as like PR, you need that, you know, that's how often you find out about things. It's how, and I think it's just so important, but to make sure you know, you collaborate with people and work with people and treat it as something where, you know, it's a two-way street and you're giving something as well in return.
Yeah. Bukky, working in Nigeria, obviously it's a different territory to what you are used to. So how are you able to build your network in another country? Because I mean, it's easy to build those in, you know, in America, in the UK, you know, you have your gatherings, but with Nigeria being so big as well, but then you're reaching out to different people. How are you able to kind of gather and create and form your network over there?
You know what? It took years, honestly. And with the way this market is situated, people want to obviously network with you. They feel they can trust you, if they feel that you're able to do the right kind of work. So it takes a lot of proving yourself, proving who you are, proving what value you bring. And in the same way I tell all of my clients, networking in your field is extremely important. So it got to a point where I started creating some of my own events so that I could meet the right people and so I can network with the right people. And outside of networking with all of our media, of course, the local media and our international media that exists locally, Nigeria is massive. It's the most overpopulated African country, but it's also extremely small. So I get situations where a brand, so for example, when I was managing the account for Bvlgari, they would want me to invite, you know, maybe 20 high net worth individuals. So apart from networking with just the media, you're networking with people as well. You have to know how to bring all the right people in the room so that the media would be interested in the first place. So it does take a lot of experience, a lot of years, but then consistency. Networking is absolutely important. This market is about who you know. Who you know, and that is all.
I guess we all agree on that. It's definitely who you know industry. Wow. So I'm going to take it to Jennifer Hodgson now. Being a founder, right? What would you say has been one of the hurdles that you've had to face in starting up your own agency?
I think besides from the obvious ones like finances, taxes, the board stuff, I think it's really kind of about forging an identity in who you are. I mean, taking the leap to go on my own, I thought I'm going to have to, you know, this has got to work. So I have to do something to stand out. And I think it's just about finding your USP and your identity. And to be fair, I say it was a challenge, but for me, the way I am, like the way that people, why my clients come to me, is that I think my USP is that I don't have a 9 to 5. I don't switch off. You know, I generally care about especially when it comes to like the talent. So with like Hannah's Girls and now some of my own boys, I just care about them, and I think that's the challenge, finding your identity when you're going into such a crowded market. I mean, for me, especially as a woman, and there's so many of the strong female-led PR agencies. I mean, you've had Charlotte on for Bell PR as well. I mean, she, for example, is such a strong leader, and I have followed her for years on Instagram and things like that, and just looked up to her as she's just amazing. And to think going into that crowded market, you have got to have something that's going to stand out. And I think that was the biggest challenge, maybe forging what MODA looks like as a person. And it's very difficult because up until about 3-4 months ago, it was only me. So trying to juggle this brand, trying to, like you say, network all the time, trying to do a million things, probably, bags under my eyes, and I've got good concealer. But I think that is the biggest challenge, like finding your identity, really find out who you are. I mean, I always say, like, because I teach fashion business as well at Chester Uni now, which is quite nice to go back and revisit everything. But I always say to people, it's about finding out who you are, but it's also finding out like who you're not as well. So everything has to align with your brand. And my kind of USP is, I wouldn't say it's very visual. I say it's me as an individual. Like, I've not had to pitch for any work. It's all come like word of mouth, which is incredible, and I'm hoping that stays the same. But yeah, I think that would be just the biggest challenge, is finding your identity and finding what makes you stand out in such a crowded market.
Yeah. Now, Jenni Holman, you actually work with Mason Rose. So for you, what's your experience actually being in a firm like that has such a weight to it? What kind of, how are you able to kind of establish your own role within that workspace?
That's a really good question. I mean, gosh, I am really lucky to work for 2 amazing women and work with a group of amazing women as well, and one guy, actually. There's a guy as well, one chap. But just going a little bit sort of leading on from what Jennifer was saying a little bit, is about knowing your values and knowing kind of what's important to you as a person, means that you can that informs your choice of maybe where you work or who you hang with. Because and actually it's something my dad once said to me. He said, wherever you work or whoever you hang with, they need to have similar values to you. And you could be polar opposites. You could be like, different types of people entirely. But values that are really key to me are kind of collaboration and sharing and inclusiveness and just being kind, being a nice person. And I think, and if you find yourself being able to work somewhere like that has those similar values, or with people who embrace those as well, you will thrive. And I'm, when I've been at Mason Rose nearly 7 years now, and I came in as an account director, and the 2 times that I have been promoted have been literally a month before I've gone on maternity leave, both times, which I think says a lot about a company that's championing women that are they are going to be taking that time out, but they still can see, not to sort of toot my own horn, but they can see potential in me, and that's something that I hope to inspire the rest of the team and also the industry as I sort of progress. And actually, Mason Rose's time, I don't know if it was you who was on the panel with her yesterday, Mika, but our modus operandi is all about creating connections. And it's true. It is about creating connections between, whether it's the client and the journalist, or the end consumer, or internally, or recommending people to other people. I think that's been something that is, without sort of realizing it, has actually become our real USP. So Has that answered a question? I think I've gone off on a few tangents, but hopefully some of it's come back to answer your question.
No, you
Mika.
definitely did. You definitely did. Thank you so much. Now we're going to have to take it to marketing, because one thing is, and I'm learning this in the industry that I'm in, is that marketing is so essential. So that's brand marketing, any sort of marketing, it's needed. But one thing that I think that people tend to get confused at is the type of marketing skills or the type of marketing directions that you need for your business or your brand. So I'm going to throw this over to Jenni, Thompson and Ellie. For you, can you describe what type of marketing there is? And I know that, Jenni, you're into brand marketing. So let's start off with that, because, you know, branding is very, very important. So for you, what kind of role do you play in brand marketing?
So for me, it is all linked. Obviously, I know that, you know, branding, PR under the marketing umbrella, it's all part of the mix. But I think what I like to do with clients is, you know, make sure that they know who they are and how they're articulating who they are with their audiences, and be that through brand, through visual brand, or be that through their PR and communications, or even their advertising strategy, or their Instagram, or whatever. We've talked about the fact that there are so many channels these days in order for you to be able to get your message out. But equally, that can be quite confusing, because particularly for smaller businesses, where do they put their efforts, and how do they measure their return on investment? So coming back to brand, I think it's about making sure that the brand reflects your brand values. And an exercise I would always suggest with organizations is, you know, slowing down and taking the time to actually articulate your brand values, and making sure that you capture that, because, you know, a brand is not just a logo, but it's actually what your people do and say every day. It's the heartbeat of your organization. It's how you interact with people. You know, it's what you obsess about. You know, that's what I say to people when they're struggling, thinking, oh, well, we do so many things, you know, but it's what you really pinpoint as your personality of the business and your heartbeat of the business. And I think when you can get an organization, whatever size, and I'm going through some of this myself in terms of branding myself now, you know, is how do you get that then across, either through your logo, your brand, and all of your touch points with your audiences. So it can be anything from, you know, and fonts, and gosh, having worked in magazines for 10 years, you know, fonts are a real big thing of mine, and making sure that you can create a brand that's got some longevity about it. You don't want to really, although brands should be flexible, but you don't want to be really recreating your brand, you know, every so often, because you're moving in a different direction. So yeah, there's lots and lots about brand marketing, really. My biggest experience of it, I guess, apart from having worked with lots of clients in dealing with, you know, them putting their advertising campaigns together and marketing and events and things like that, but was branding the Living magazine. You know, we were a fledgling magazine where there was bigger regional players out there that we needed to cut a space in to be able to attract advertising revenue. So it was really important that our brand values were defined and that everybody across the UK understood those brand values. So from a journalist in Scotland to a journalist down south in Bournemouth, they needed to understand what the brand values were so that they were writing for that audience in the same way. Getting things down on paper, getting those ideas down, and then making sure people live and understand it is kind of the foundation, first of all.
Yeah. Now for you, Ellie, I know you work with amazing luxury brands. What's the one thing that you do to keep the brand and the marketing of that business going and still being seen, even in a world where it's changing and there's new different sorts of, you know, things that are coming about, different topics, different, you know, ideas that are coming? How do you keep the brands that you're working with still be seen?
Of course, yeah. I think like what Jenni was saying, I think talking about obviously the brand story, but as well, I think now people want to be seeing something that's a little bit new and a little bit different and knowing that you're on top of things. So I think often, especially when it comes to luxury, is the idea of something being personalized and being experienced. So for example, obviously, because I often do obviously events, in that term, it's when you're thinking of what the meaning, what's the point of the event, what's the meaning behind it, what are you actually trying to do with this event? It's not just about bringing people together. What else are you actually trying to do? And then with that, really feeding into that. So with the marketing and thinking, okay, so the event might be part of it, but really there's a whole guest journey, right from as soon as they hear about it and what they find out about, right until the end, and also to what happens after the event. It's the whole guest journey. It's about the whole experience and it being personalized from start to finish. And I think in a world where people have seen a lot of different, you know, campaigns and everything, you really have to be thinking about that and what your brand story is and how you're channeling that at every single point, every single part of the process, really.
Now, for you who you work in the events industry as well, with everything that's happening in this world, with the pandemic or the panoramic, whatever you want to call it, with everything that's happening, how has it affected your industry per se, and how have you managed to turn it around?
Yeah, so obviously it's obviously been a really difficult time for obviously events and hospitality in general. So in both terms of that, it's been difficult obviously for the hotel, and of course in events, obviously, you know, it's not something the lifestyle in events is, you know, it's very busy, it's very, very fast paced. The same with PR, you know, you've always got things to be doing. And suddenly then when events aren't really happening anymore, it's about really trying to adapt. So obviously adapting to remote working is a big thing, because that's not really something that I've actually really done that much of before. And then from that point as well, it was thinking, okay, so a lot of it now is you want your clients to still feel really looked after and really appreciated. So, okay, their event can't go ahead, but how can we still make sure that they're feeling looked after and that we're maintaining that relationship throughout? So, you know, it could be, for example, you know, you're rescheduling an event and then you're rescheduling it again, and it's been difficult. So that's definitely been one thing on the client side. And I think just from a personal point of view, you know, you see a lot of your friends and things in the industry, you know, people get made redundant. It's a really difficult time. And I think as well, it's about all coming together and seeing how you can help each other and how you can collaborate and offer support for each other as well.
Yeah, definitely. And that's the reason why I love stuff like this, the summit that we're having with all of you guys on the panel together, speaking the truth about the industry. Now, the one thing I did want to ask is, what are the hardships that you face being in the PR or communications industry, let's just say as a whole? What are the things that you kind of go up against in this industry? And I'll throw this over to Jordan.
Hi. I think it's there's kind of challenges, really. I think that and this is sort of part of why that Liz and I rebranded the agency because formerly we were known as Liz Matthews PR, and we've rebranded to Good Culture, because actually the PR in the name sometimes can be limiting, particularly when you're going after big budgets with big brands, because when you think about kind of how the C-suite CPR, you're very much at the kind of the lower hanging fruit. They actually value spending money and getting trackable ROI more so than the idea and the illusion of just creating value through messaging. And so I think one of our challenges has been about really trying to quantify the value of PR and actually make sure that it really has a firm space and priority in kind of the bigger brand's agenda, because actually we do far more than just get coverage. You know, we always say, we joke that we're not the jumpers on pages kind of agency. It's not about the product placement that once people just thought PR was. It's far more in depth than that. So we're working with brands to create strategy that then we amplify and, you know, execute marketing initiatives. We're doing brand-to-brand collaborations. We just brokered the Star Wars and Pat McGrath deal, and then we PR'd it. We're not just inheriting the thing at the end, and I think that's the kind of common misconception. It's just an afterthought. It's something that happens once you've done the big plan. We're working to try and change and re-educate brands on that.
Definitely. And Jenny, what are the misconceptions, as Jordan just touched on, which is perfect? So what are the misconceptions that people have about the PR industry? Because I would say when I first got into the entertainment industry, if you want to say, I thought it was very fast. It was very, very fast paced. You know, it's glitz and glam. You know, you get to go to all the nice parties. You get to, you know, receive all the free gifts and stuff. But no one really sees the people behind, because, you know, as a journalist as well, I also always have PRs in my inbox sending me things to post up. So what are the kind of misconceptions that you've had to face and deal with being in the PR industry, or even marketing as well?
Yeah, like you say, that it's really glamorous. As a publisher of magazines, I got offered to go to event after event after event from PRs, and I just really couldn't take them all up. If I was going to do everything of that and have a life, so I just really had a policy where I kind of would get the rest of the team to go to those kind of things. But like Ellie, having put events on, I think I put on a partnership in an event once when Anna Wintour came to York and worked with her niece Ellie, who put on an event, a charitable fashion show event in York. And I saw the opportunity, obviously, as a regional magazine, that actually if we could partnership with this and get proper coverage for our readers, that would just, you know, elevate our brand hugely. And I was one of the only regional publishers who really got in and covered that story and gave it some longevity. But on the actual night, I remember I went down on the day, and backstage they were rehearsing the actual fashion show. So to go and support Ellie, her niece, on that day, we went down. I had a photographer there. We did all the backstage shooting. So obviously, again, we were collecting content for the magazine, but also supporting them. So this was all day. I was still putting out my magazines on the table to where potentially Anna Wintour would walk through, you know, literally half an hour before she was due to arrive. I got ready in the toilets, and I remember going out to get my photograph taken, like 100 miles an hour, and then being asked, do you want to go in and have your photograph taken with Anna Wintour? And I thought, I'm the most unprepared at the moment to have the moment of my life. But I was doing it, coming back to what you were saying, Jennifer, about doing it from my brand and from my, you know, I wanted everything to be right for us and for us to get the best opportunity. And yeah, the picture's taken, and I just look at it every time and think, if only you'd seen what I was doing literally 5 minutes beforehand. So that's the unglamorous side, I guess, that people just don't see. And I know all these ladies on here have had similar experiences.
I can imagine. I definitely want to hear from Jenni Holman. What's been your experience?
Common misconceptions. I think, again, going back to the old, similar to what Jenni said, the old Patsy and Eddie analogy. And there is that sort of slog behind the scenes. It's a bit like, graceful swan on top, underneath, paddling away. And because it's such a changing beast, and you know, I think I'm repeating some of the comments that were mentioned before, but like, you know, we're reacting to news or changes in plans or client requests. You know, that's the thing that we need to make sure that we are on it, you know, 24/7, as in knowing what the latest media types are. If a client's asking me about, you know, they've heard about Clubhouse, I'm like, you know, I need to know what the opportunities are. I think the challenge is also the opportunity, though. I think, you know, with the fact that everyone's got this kind of multi-channel approach to how they consume media. I think someone said, I was at a workshop the other day, which said you have to see something 7 times on social media for it to sink in. Well, in order to do all those things, you need to really kind of have that vast amount of knowledge in all those different areas. So it's from, you know, we now have a partnership with a creative studio called Studio Black Tomato, where we do all our digital and content creation. We do a lot of end consumer things where we bring clients directly to sort of end consumers. It's almost like, I think Jordan had said, re-PRing the word PR in a way, because it is actually more it's brand comms. We have to do the whole gamut. But people do understand PR. They, you know, clients or whoever it is, they understand the word PR. Brand communications can be open to a lot of different interpretations in the same way that digital marketing is. So it's about getting that balance, really. But yeah, no, it's been a kind of very interesting time, especially with and of course the social media, where everybody has the ability to be a journalist or a critic within, you know, 190 word count on Twitter. So yeah, it's fun. I think that's the challenge, but the opportunities, really.
Yeah. Now for you, Ellie, working with a luxury hotel currently, is there any sort of experience that you've had where you've wished you've done something better in any sort of way? Because I mean, a lot of the times, you know, we can go into starting campaigns or creating something or doing an event, and then something has gone wrong. How have you been able to handle it, and what could you have done better?
Yeah, so actually, I think events, definitely in the industry in general, it's something where you never really are completely sure with how it's going to go on the day. You always have to really like pre-prepare and over-plan, because you just have to. And I've always known this, but actually it was probably a few years ago when I was doing an event, and it was actually when I was freelance. But I remember having a big party for this music company, and I'd planned it all myself, about 1,000 people coming. And I remember on the night we had this brass band that were meant to be coming, and they were meant to all be playing. It was like 12-piece brass band or something. And then just as they were about to play, we realized that basically the PA system, everything kind of broke, the generator broke, and we were like, what are we going to do? And I was just like, can you be like a marching brass band, or can you do something? They were like, yeah, we can. And they ended up being a marching brass band going through the event. And everyone was like, this is amazing. And I remember thinking, like, it so nearly just like ruined the event, because I was like, what we're going to do. And I remember that must have been maybe like 5 years ago or something now, but it always really stuck with me that it was lucky that obviously we found ways around it. But that just shows you that with every kind of event, you always have to be thinking ahead of what are all the options that might go wrong, and how do we, like, what backups do we have for everything. And that's probably the main thing that I would take from that experience.
Does anybody else have any experiences? Because I know that for me, there's certain sort of PR moves that I've made, and I'm just like, I fumbled it. I shouldn't have done that. Has anyone gone into any sort of, I'll ask Bukky this question. Is there any sort of campaign that you've done that you could have thought that that wasn't the right campaign to do?
No, and this is not because I'm perfect, but no.
I love the confidence.
But I did want to comment on something, because there's something Jordan said that I thought like really resonated with me and for this market, is people just not really understanding what PR is, and it being seen as just a smaller plug and play in the press, and it's a lot more than that. The strategy that goes behind things, you're thinking about crisis management. I mean, but now that you mentioned, is there something we've worked on we thought we had done better? Yes, I do have one. A very interesting story. We had an international app coming into Nigeria, and, we had put out all the information, all of our tables were sold out, and the artist was meant to arrive that evening because there was a delay in flight, and the flight came and there was no artist. So now here we are filled with an entire hall with people that have paid thousands of dollars, waiting to see this particular artist that never came. And then I begin to ask myself as an agency, should I get into asking the client, can I see the contract you have with this artist? Do I need to go as far as double checking all of that before I start to communicate that this artist is coming? And that's something that unfortunately I had to implement. If you're going to tell me to put out this information, I'm going to need to verify, unfortunately, from your end that everything is accurate before we do this, because we were left with a hall full of people dressed to the nines, international chefs, and there was no Brian McKnight, okay? It was a mess. And of course, we had to start comms immediately. We had to apologize to all of the guests and handle refunds and promise people that the event was going to take place another day. But those kinds of things do happen. How could I have controlled that? Perhaps if I had double checked with the client, and eventually we found out that the booking agent never did the booking and X, Y, and Z and all the drama. But how could we have known that as an agency? And we put out that information. So you can see all the investigative work and psychological work that goes into this business.
Yeah.
It's quite a bit. And in terms of difficulties for me in this market is trying to explain to global brands that they need to localize their content for this market. We work with a lot of international brands. They send us information, they send us content. It will not fly here. This is a different market. You're dealing with Africa. So you have to be open to your local agency trying to localize your content so that it fits your target audience here.
Yeah. Now for you, Jennifer Hodgson, how would you say has been the most, going into starting your own firm, let's say, when people are trying to get into the press, what is the best way for them to do so? In fact, when people are trying to create their own agencies, how do they go about it?
one, be prepared not to sleep for a long time. But I think you've just got to know who you are. You've got to have strong messaging. And like I said, if this comes down to from building the brand to a single press release, you've got to have something out that's going to come up against all these other brands, all these other agencies. And I think it's just about that, defining the messaging. I think that's so important. And I just wanted to touch upon like what Jordan and Bukky said as well on like the last question, that I think PR now is so much more than sending out a press release and getting in the press. I mean, to me, like especially to a few of my brands, actually probably to most of them, I'm like their number 2. So when it comes to, product development or, even down to what their office looks like sometimes, it's like, Jen, what do you think of this? What do you think? And that's not traditional PR. And I think it's just really important for anyone that is watching this to, there is so much more that goes into it, and the challenge of trying to sometimes educate your clients on that, educate the time that goes into what we all do. We all know that it's not Monday to Friday 9 to 5. It's being on the phone at midnight like I was last night. That's what it is. But yeah, I think just the strong messaging and being clear on who you are and having something that stands out. And even if you have the most boring product in the world, but if you've got a great spin on it, then you're sorted.
How do you think the PR and marketing industry has changed in the past 5 years? I know it's not the same. And again, as we're going into a new normal, things are different. Now we're in a social media generation. So a lot of the times, the things that you think that a PR is needed for, people are actually doing it for themselves. So people are becoming self-educated or self-taught PRs. So for you, starting your firm, how do you think the industry has changed in the past 5 years? And what do you even think the industry is going to look like in the next 10 years, if you can think that far?
Oh, God, I don't want to think of it well. To be honest, over the past, it's just the speed of things has just escalated. The length of time from something going on social, going in the press. I know even when my girls do statements, we don't even have to send those statements out anymore. So they use different social media. It's just a complete whirlwind now. But I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing. I feel like the speed of information getting out there is, well, it depends what information it is, obviously, but the speed of information you can get out there to your clients now compared to what it was 5 years ago. I mean, PR it looks so different. I mean, I remember when I first started, and I said it was only 5 years ago, and what I kind of did then to what I do now is totally different. It feels like it feels like a little bit old-fashioned. Like I remember sat in my office, like picking journalists on the phone, and they were just like, "Oh, I'm busy." And now I feel like it's so much more digital. I have these people on WhatsApp. I'll drop them a quick email. I'll send them a DM when I see something. It's just so different now. The way we communicate is so much quicker and so much. I feel like, I think I've touched upon it before, but I feel like it's so much more genuine now, the relationships that you have. And and especially during the pandemic, I mean, it's been very difficult, especially for me, I would say, to network, because I can't go anywhere. So I think I had one meeting with Katie from Lutheran when we could actually go for dinner, which was brilliant. And then straight after that, back into lockdown, seeing things on email. And you guys, Mika, you'll know your inbox is probably blowing up every day with PRs. So trying to get across the line at the moment, that's the hardest thing, that takes the longest, I think, especially in a digital global pandemic where you can't actually do face-to-face, which I don't know about you guys, but I can't wait to go back to my face-to-face meetings and actually having human contact with people. I feel like that's just so important. And I think even if we've forgotten it a little bit, and at first I think all these Zoom meetings, everything was such a novelty, wasn't it? And it was like, oh, we stop on Zoom, and now, oh my God, I even said to one of my clients last night, I can't wait to not ever say the word, let's just hop on a Zoom again.
I think we're all tired of the Zoom calls. But I'm going to push that question to Jenni Holman as well. How do you think has social media ruined the essence of PR and marketing? Because now everybody, as I was saying before, everybody can do it themselves. So essentially, people were saying that we'll get to a point where will we still need PRs in the future, or would it be the case where people will be using social media as their way just to do what they need to do without going to a company to help them do it? What do you think about that?
Great question. I don't think it's ruined it. No. If anything, I think, it has given the opportunity for smaller brands that might not have the means or the know-how to hire a kind of PR agency or so to speak. So it's given them a bit of a voice at the table. However, as I think we've all said, the role of the PR has changed so much, particularly in the last 5 years. And I think that, clients are seeing that there is a need for this kind of multifaceted approach, and also for the people who have really strong relationships with stakeholders and people that will move the needle for them. So I think, with a PR agency and so forth, there's the experience and the wider network and the access to all the different kind of ranges within the communications matrix. And actually just going back a little bit to what Jordan was saying about how, we aren't just the afterthought of the big, PRs aren't the people who just are the afterthought, if you like, for the big plan or communicate the big plan. Without sort of going completely over the top, we are the instigators of the plan now. We are the instigators of the product launch or what have you, and I think that's where we really do add value, and especially in this super competitive marketplace. I mean, goodness me, we know how competitive it is out there, and to have that network is key. But I think there's room for all types of media, if that's answered your question.
Yeah, it has. Love that. And it's so true. It's a very competitive industry. But just to go off of that, so I'm going to take it to Ellie now. Ellie, you've actually started a community called the Rise Network. So one of the things I wanted to ask you was, why did you start up that network, essentially that community?
Yeah, of course. So to be honest, it was something I really wanted to do for a long time, but just didn't really have the time to do it. And I'm actually, so in my spare time, I'm actually a member of the National Council of Psychotherapists, and I'm a coach as well. So I've always been quite keen, and in my role, obviously as head of events as well, to, mentor and coach, members of the team as well. And to be honest, when I saw, obviously, with the pandemic and seeing, a lot of people get made redundant and seeing the industry and things changing, I was like, how can I try and use, obviously, the coaching and things that I've, the experience that I've got, but also to help other people, not only just within the industry, but just people who might want a little bit of help, because I know that I think this year has been really difficult. And I think, whether it's mental well-being or whether it's the idea that you're just, maybe you have lost your job and you're trying to work out how to get back on track with where you want to be. I think even for a lot of women in general, a lot of careers, have taken, depending on what industry you're in, some people have been busier than ever and other people have been quieter. And I think it's about making sure that everyone's got the support around them to make sure that they can kind of carry on their journey and come back after all of this and really progress. So to be honest, the idea of it was just to create a space where people could, share advice, skill swap, help each other out, give each other kind of tips and tools to basically just move forward with their career, really.
I love that. And then another one who's created a platform, Bukky. So last year, 2020, you became the director / co-founder of one of Nigeria's first digital publications, the Lagos Today newspaper. Congratulations. So why was it important for you to create that platform? There's so many different, we know that Africa, they have so many different sorts of publications, but why did you feel the need to create that platform?
Yes, thank you. 2020 really thing. For me, one of the things that I know that was important to me was to start to tell positive African stories. When you look at Africa as a whole, you hear everything from the corruption to instability and whatnot. But there are a lot of amazing stories out of Africa, a lot of phenomenal people doing such amazing work. I mean, look at Mrs. Iwela, who's just been appointed recently, that's making the trend. So I thought about starting it at home. I live in Lagos City. I thought it would be great to have a digital platform that tells great stories about Lagos and different things happening. Yes, we do cover general news, but then to push out our own narrative and begin to tell our own stories is something that I've always been passionate about. And, you know, when you talk about the changes and everything that's, you know, how things are changing in terms of 5 years ago and to now, you can see that a lot of things are digital. Where it's easy for us to share information now. I'm able to connect with Jenni Thompson if I wanted to send her a DM, you know. So digital was the way we wanted to go. I definitely didn't want to do a physical paper because then that would limit it to just here. And we really want to tell these stories, you know, to the entire world. So the digital platform was great and also gives me an opportunity to, you know, tell stories of my clients as well. We're happy. We're doing really good. A lot of people are logging on and people are receiving messages in our inbox. And, you know, if you notice where PR is going and even just comms in general, it's also about building these communities and you know, sending key messaging to the community. So this is great. I mean, we don't know where it'll go. We're not a year old yet, but, you know, we're thriving and it's working out really well.
No, I love that because we have so many budding PRs and marketers who want to know more about the industry, and you guys have not held back. You guys have said it all. So what we're going to do is we're going to go over to the questions because I know we have some people who have asked some questions. So if the team can help me and go to the questions so we can get them up there. Sorry. So the first question is, sorry, I can't see. So I'm just trying to get the question. So the first question is, so can you make it bigger? Right, so the first question is, what is your advice to women? And this is by Moyin Olubodu. I hope I said your name correctly, sorry. What is your advice to women who are just starting in PR now with very little experience and knowledge? I'm going to throw this over to Jordan to answer.
I would say work experience. I got my first break through a relationship that I made doing work experience. So that's how I met Liz. I did an internship with her 15 years ago, and then I went on to get another job. And then sort of look at me now, you know, we've co-founded a business together, and that really was, you know, our first introduction was through kind of interning and building relationships. So definitely interning.
Jenni, what would you say? Jenni Holman, yeah.
Oh,
yes. Sorry, there's so many Jennies.
There are a lot of Jennies. I think, I mean, gosh, it's a good way of learning PR is by PRing yourself, right?
Yeah.
And I think, you know, sending that email and getting in touch. LinkedIn is a great way of getting involved. I think not having the knowledge or not having the experience isn't a bad thing when you're starting out, as long as you've got the right attitude. And you're willing to kind of roll your sleeves up, then it's not rocket science. You can get the experience, you can get the knowledge, and I think everybody who's on this panel today, the knowledge and the experience has come through having that experience. So yeah, send that email, PR yourself, and have a good attitude.
Love that. Let's get the next question up. Show the Bride says, we're a bridal beauty brand, Bridal Box by Laudine Marie, plug there. We want to market to our customers, but in a sensitive way, given the impact financially on our audience. Any advice? So I'm actually going to throw this to Jennifer Hodgson, because that was one of the things that you spoke about in terms of the financial help in starting.
Yeah, I think it's just all about your messaging. I think, so what was the question about the actual brand itself or the financial side, sorry?
So we want to market to our customers, but in a sensitive way, given the impact financially on our audience. Any advice?
Oh, do you know what? It's a really difficult one, and especially with bridal at the moment. I mean, everyone knows the traumas that the wedding industry has gone through. So you are going to find a lot of challenges. I think in terms of depending what your product is, I mean, price point, knowing your market level is so important, really, really important. And I just think just do your research on competitors, see what's out there. I mean, don't go out pricing yourself that you're just going to look socially. I think that I'd say like socially insensitive, basically. I think that's really, really important. And it's something that I always say to my brand, read the room, basically.
Yeah.
Like Jenny said, it's not rocket science, all this. You've just got to be able to read people and read the room. And psychologically, I think if you are launching, say, like a bridal beauty brand, get an idea of timeline and then get an idea of, I guess, when your customers are going to have that.
Yeah.
They're not all. It's just a really. I do feel very sorry for the bridal industry, whether you're beauty, whether you're fashion. I think it's a really, really scary time. And I think just maybe factor that into your customers. I mean, they might not want to be going out of their way to spend their money just yet. So I'd really just take this time to build your brand messaging, build your ethos, have it ready. So when you can go, you can smash it. When the weddings are up and back running again, like your brand is the face of it.
Yeah, definitely. Next question we have. Genuine love. What do you think is the best way to gain the best insight into PR, especially in the midst of a pandemic? I'm going to throw this to Ellie. If Ellie can answer this question.
I think one thing that I spoke a little bit about in the whole like networking thing, but I think really just reaching out as well to people so that it might be, I think I've got the question right, getting an insight into it. Yeah, I think definitely, obviously, I think, and I don't know much obviously in terms of what kind of PR resources are out there, but I'm sure obviously there's a lot of resources and obviously groups as well. So just like obviously my Rise network, I'm sure there's lots of other different like networks and communities you can really join. And actually, I think as well, if there's someone, that you have seen or whatever, it could be, on an event like this, or it could be even on LinkedIn, and you can just say, look, hi, can I even have, 20 minutes of your time? But at least if you're going there with an expectation as well. So it's not just like, hey, can I pick your brains about this? It's like, can I maybe arrange just a certain amount of time and just ask you a few quick questions on this? Often people want to help, and the worst that can happen is that they haven't got time and that they can't. But I think it's really good just to be trying to, like you say, PR yourself, be putting yourself in that and really trying to build relationships with people.
Definitely. And you spoke about your Rise network. How can somebody join the network? How can they?
Yeah, of course. Well, I'll put the link in a minute on here. But yeah, so we do basically quite a lot of events. And the idea with the events as well is that we'll bring in an industry speaker to actually talk about something. So, for example, it could be someone in PR to talk about how they got into the industry and what you can do to really get there. So again, the idea of possibly skill swapping with someone else who maybe has got the experience that you want to learn, and then you can offer them something in exchange. To kind of see how you can both learn it from different points as well. So I'll put the Instagram handle on the comment section now as well. And yeah, please do join. And obviously, I'd love to hear as well any ideas you have for events or things that you'd like. And then, of course, that's really good. Thank you.
Amazing. Do we have any more questions? Okay, NH says, what advice would you give to new brands that want to get into the press? I'm going to throw this over to Bukky.
Hire a PR agent. I'm kidding. Obviously, I mean, if you're a new brand, you want to get into the press. Obviously, we've talked about building relationships with the press. And again, we've talked about things being a lot more easier now where you can DM someone and they will answer. Wasn't like that before. I also advise giving whatever editor or whatever media person you're trying to work with an experience with your brand. It's always nice when they know it. So for example, if I was launching a makeup brand, I would definitely want the editor to have some samples of that, sample it, and then I begin to tell my story. So yeah, you can easily contact anyone these days. It's so much more easier. And just to buttress on what Ellie was talking about, I also find it very helpful. There are specific Instagram handles that people can follow if you're interested in PR. There's PR Girl Manifesto. There's all sorts of interesting things out there. There's also a lot of people. And there's one thing I don't think that I heard here, which is being open to getting a mentor. I think that there are a lot of women that own agencies that will not mind lifting another woman up. So if you're able to DM someone to get some mentorship advice and all of that, that would be great and helpful for you as well.
I'm going to throw that question to Jenni as well, but just to touch on what you just said, Bukky, about mentorship. For me, I have a mentor, and they've been able to help me in line of the industry in different segments, in different sectors. So I think it's very, very important that everyone has a mentor at one side. It's almost like they kind of have to go through the fire so you don't have to go through it. You know, they go through different experiences as well. But not only that, with the mentorship that you get, you kind of get guided on the things to do and what not to do, but they also open up their network for you as well. So you've also got a double network because of the fact that you are affiliated. So again, it's back to the who do you know situation. But Jenni, I'm going to throw that to
Mika,
you too.
also, okay. Yeah, I was just going to say also joining professional bodies is amazing as well. There's so much resources in there, and they have opportunities for, you know, student membership, regular membership, and you know, taking advantage of those tons of classes. There's just so much online. So thank you.
And Jenni, being the brand marketer that you are, for the person that's trying to get their brand into the press, what would you advise them?
Well, first of all, make sure that you know what your story is. So what's going to make you unique over somebody else? So you'll have done some due diligence around the competitive market that you're operating in. How do you cut your story amongst those? How does your head raise above the parapet? And I think in this day and age, and I think even with the pandemic more recently, people have slowed down and are much more in tune to understanding somebody else's story. I think in the world before, think about my world, it was so busy and it was so hectic and it was so 100 miles an hour. And yes, you wanted that compassion to listen to everything around you, but maybe you just didn't have that headspace. Now those journalists are sat there and they've had their wings clipped a bit. They're not out doing as much of the positive, promotional stuff they might like to be doing. Make sure your story stands out to them. And if that's a personal story from A to B, there will be something in there, I think, that will make a difference amongst the other noise that's out there. Direct, obviously, we've said DMing and speaking to people these days is far easier than it was. But I would also say about professional photography. So if you are wanting coverage, but this is particularly in regional press or regional magazines, they will look at somebody who's got professional photography over somebody who hasn't every single time, because in this day and age, they aren't necessarily employing large photography units or anything like that. So if your brand has got good photography that would sit well in their publication, then you'll get the edge on somebody else.
Yeah, amazing. And then we've got time for one more question, and I'm going to round it up. And so he says, you have mentioned building relationships, but on the legal and contractual side of things, how would you advise someone who is just starting in PR to cover all aspects if they don't have legal knowledge? Anybody can take this question, actually, because it's such a broad question. So who wants to go?
Well, I would say, I mean, it really depends on the kind of type of work that you're doing in PR or communication. So as an example, a lot of the work we do is around contracting talent with brands. And so we're negotiating big design deals, 3-year design deals with brands. And you're getting into a lot of different kind of contentious subjects because there's things about kind of IP and litigation. And if it's not your area of expertise, you have to seek legal counsel, because when it comes to, particularly when you're negotiating on a third party and you're the expert on their behalf, you can't sign up or encourage them to sign something that you don't fully understand. And so there's no shortcut when it comes to legal, and that would need to be either factored into your commission when you're negotiating these deals, or it's something that you end up factoring in terms of the retainers that your clients pay you. But there's absolutely no shortcut, and I can say this because I've been burnt before when starting up in the career and kind of negotiating these deals and going, just fluffing it, and it's fine when the S doesn't hit the fan, but when it does, it really does, and you're 100% accountable. So I would just say make sure you've got good legal counsel, and there's lots of different firms who specialize in lots of different sort of areas, whether it's IP or, you know, different sort of sectors of law, but you have to get a specialist. That's my my kind of experience.
Amazing. Anybody else want to touch on that before we round up? No? Okay. So before we go, obviously we have to give one piece of advice. So any budding PR or person going into marketing. So I'm going to start off with Ellie, then we'll go into Jenni, and then Jordan, and then we'll go around that way. So Ellie, what advice would you give to somebody who's trying to go into the industry that you're in, dealing with luxury brands?
Yeah, I would say, obviously, with regards to mentorship, networking, of course. And I also think as well, just being really clear on what it is actually you want and what your role would be within that and what you can bring. Because I think often, you know, it could be whether it's your actual skills that are transferable. So even if you're coming from another industry, there might be kind of similar skills that would actually be really relevant to PR or to events or something that you might not have thought of, but really looking at what your whole kind of almost like a SWOT analysis of like you and what your strengths are and what you kind of need work on, but at least so you've got a really clear picture of exactly what you can actually bring to it, and to know how to actually communicate that value as well, I think is probably one of the most important things.
Grand. So Jenni, briefly, what advice would you give to somebody that's in the PR industry or trying to get into the PR industry?
I'd say start agency side first. You get to meet and learn with a whole bunch of different people and experiences and opportunities. You know, in-house is fantastic, but there's nothing like cutting your teeth in agency, in my opinion.
Love that. Bukky, what advice would you give to someone trying to get into your industry?
I would say that, first of all, you know the business. Don't be afraid of personal development. I would also, suggest mentorship, as I mentioned, building your network of editors, and then giving it your best shot, I think that when you spend enough time doing something repetitively, or you're within a space, at some point you will be good at what you do, and you will attract the business. But you have to know how to do what you do really well. So, I mean, even at my office, in my agency, we're constantly learning. It's a training ground. It never stops. There's never an instant where we're like, okay, we know the business and we're going to bed that way. But, we're constantly looking for new strategies, new things to learn, new opportunities. And that's what I would advise. Know your work, have a mentor, and give it your best shot.
Amazing. Jordan, what would be your piece of advice?
What we tell kind of new starters is be genuinely engaged. Don't get into this industry and then you don't want to be on Clubhouse, or you don't want to be using TikTok, or you're not using the new tech and you're not reading. It's reading and genuinely being immersed and engaged. So kind of sites that I look at on a regular is like Business of Fashion. If you're interested in fashion, you need to be up to date news, what's happening in the industry. PR Week, it's quite old hat, but again, it gives you sort of a vantage point on what's happening in the industry, in the landscape, what agencies are getting what kind of clients. And I think to everyone's earlier point around when we give advice to brands, know what your brand is. Actually, as an individual, you're a brand too. So what are your values? What is it that you believe in? If you're really passionate about sustainability, look into an agency or a brand that speaks to those core values. And that's when you become an asset. And that's, I think that's kind of treat yourself like a brand as well.
Yeah. Jennifer Hodgson.
I would just say it's quite basic, but it's be prepared to work your socks off, because I know coming through the industry, there's 10 people waiting to get my job. So, you've got to be prepared to put in the hours. It's not, I always say to people, I've got 2 interns now, and I say it's not 9 to 5, and it sounds savage, but if I message you at 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock at night, then I need a response, pretty much.
Yeah.
It's not, I always say to people, like, a bit like what you touched on, Jordan, like, know who you are as well. If you want to be in this industry, target the agencies and who have got the clients that you're interested in, that you're genuinely interested in, because in this industry, you do have to genuinely care Like I wouldn't ever take on a client that I didn't like resonate with personally, or I couldn't see the potential in the market space, because it would leave me uninterested, and then I'm doing a disservice to a client then. So it always has to go down. It has to go down the track, and that's all I'd say. Just work your socks off and make sure your brand values align with your agency that you're going for, or brand.
Love that. And lastly, Jenni, what advice would you give to someone trying to get into your industry?
I would say it's about being accountable for what you do, and I know that can go across any industry, but really being accountable, managing yourself and your output is really key, and being engaged, as you've just said, Jennifer, actually being engaged in the subject. If you're not engaged with that and you can't deliver a passion about what you're actually, marketing, selling, whatever, it will come across. It just won't deliver, and it won't do everything for the client that they want it to. And I also think about seeking feedback on your performance when you're starting out. That was a really tough pill for me to swallow when I was in my 20s, when somebody, and I was gung-ho about where I wanted to be, damned everybody else around me, and actually somebody stopped me, as a sponsor, and said, maybe if you got some feedback just on the way that you approach some things, you might be able to create your style. And that was one of the biggest pieces of advice I ever got received, really. So yeah.
I love that. Thank you so much, ladies, for joining us on this panel, the Now PR Media Marketing panel. I hope everybody took something from it. I know I did. I'm literally writing mental notes. But if you didn't get a chance to get everything, you can actually go back and rewatch this. If we can get the hashtag up, because I want to make sure I announce the hashtag. If the team can help me put the hashtag up. So we're going to have the hashtag that will be put up real soon. And please, on Twitter, make sure you're following WOTC Magazine, and then also hashtag NWS21, right? So please do that. We're going to have the panelists actually put their social media handles on the comment section so you guys can follow them. But the hashtag for today is Now Women Summit. So hashtag Now Women Summit, hashtag NWS21. So again, thank you so much, ladies. I hope you enjoyed yourself on this panel. Thank you for sharing your gems, your knowledge, your wisdom. It's very, very, very much appreciated. And stay tuned for the next panel, which is PR 101. And I'm going to see you again tomorrow. Thank you again so much. Bye, ladies.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Thank you. Bye.